Well, welcome to the Middlesex Moments radio show. I'm Dr. Anna Wasesha, president of Middlesex Community College, located right here in Middletown, Connecticut. And today my guests are Chris Gargamelli, who is the program coordinator for our Vet Tech program. So he's actually Dr. Chris Gargamelli. Since I'm calling myself doctor, we got to be equal here. And Amy Lawton, who is now tell me veterinary technology professor. Tell me what your job is, Amy.
Well, I'm the veterinary technician for the program.
That's right. And it's an accredited program, so
Correct.
Each of you plays a really important role in keeping ourselves accredited because each of you brings to the program specific skills. But this is a program to train veterinary technicians, which you must have gone through some time ago.
Yes, I did. I went to school in Massachusetts, actually. There's a couple programs in that state, and that was kind of where I was living at the time. So I went to school in Massachusetts. I graduated in 1991. So I've been a technician for over 25 years now.
So do you feel the same way about the field as you did when you were going into it?
I do. I actually found my niche. I'm really passionate about relieving pain and anxiety in my veterinary patients. So I specialize in anesthesia, which is a specialty certification that technicians can go on to once they graduate tech school. There are several academies out there. Anesthesia is just one of them. There's emergency critical care, there's dentistry, there's internal medicine. So there's several specialty certifications that technicians can train towards throughout their career.
And that field has had to have evolved a lot since the 60s and 70s. I don't think people were worried about cleaning their dog's teeth back in the day. So, Chris, when did veterinarians begin thinking about all these other pieces of healthcare for animals?
So if you look at the history of veterinary medicine, it has mirrored the human healthcare to some extent. So when there's been big jumps in the human healthcare, there's also been big jumps in the veterinary side. So, for example, kind of the first big jump we saw in veterinary medicine was in the early 80s with the advent of better vaccines, and also that was when the advent of multiple antibiotics came along. So, if you think back to the 50s and 60s, there was the traditional penicillin and followed by amoxicillin. And then now, looking on the human side and on the veterinary side, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of antibiotics. So, as advances in science and medicine occurred, so did changes in veterinary practice. And then same thing that happened on the human side with specialization in the healthcare and who does what. You have the medical doctor, then the registered nurse, then the nursing assistant. Same thing happened in veterinary medicine. You still had the veterinarian, but then the level of training increased for the veterinary technicians. And they very much mirror the human RN, except without the specialization. So our veterinary technicians, we expect them to take x-rays, draw blood, go ahead and do surgery and anesthesia, work in the exam room, where there's kind of specialties in human healthcare for each of those. We haven't quite got to that level of specialization yet in veterinary medicine, but the level of care required and the level of training from our technicians has increased immensely.
Right, and it sounds like then you would be the equivalent of a nurse practitioner or a nurse anesthesiologist.
That's correct.
Right, yeah, and they're midwives. There's nothing like that for animals, is there?
I don't think so.
No, it's there's a subspecialty of veterinary medicine called theriogenology. So that's our word for the reproductive side. And again, so much of that in veterinary medicine has to do with the genetics of breeding. And if you look at dog breeds, there's so many dog breeds, and each has their own issues. So the proper breeding, getting the right lines. So there is a subspecialty of veterinary medicine that deals specifically with that. But again, we don't have kind of the midwife side of it, but we do have veterinarians who specialize just in that area of veterinary medicine.
Well, we have to take a break, but I'm sure that the listeners are with me on this incredible curiosity about the animal kingdom. So when we come back, let's talk a little bit more about that and then about the program here at Middlesex.
Great.
So we'll be right back. Well, welcome back to Middlesex Moments Radio Show. And today I'm talking with Dr. Chris Gargamelli, who's a veterinarian. And he's the program coordinator for the Vet Tech program, and Amy Lawton, who is the vet technician for the Vet Tech program. So let's actually, we can always go back to the Wild Kingdom piece, but just tell me about the program and what kinds of students are drawn to it and what's involved. How long does it take to become a veterinary technician? And,
Sure.
Tell me all the details.
So we're very proud to have our 2-year associate degree program in veterinary technology here at Middlesex Community College. This spring, we're going to be graduating our second class. So relative to a lot of the other programs here on campus, it's a relatively new program, but it's a great opportunity to get involved in veterinary medicine. So our program is one of the unique programs on campus in that we have selective admission, meaning that there's certain classes you have to complete prior to applying to the program. And those are your basic biology, your chemistry, your English, computer science, and math. So it takes most students a year here on campus in our general studies program to complete those classes before they apply to the program. We've actually had one student apply directly from high school, but that was through AP credits. But the general path that most students take is a year here on campus, which is a great opportunity to kind of get in, experience the general college life here on campus. And then after completion of those prerequisites, there's an application for the program that's separate from the college application. So what happens is you apply for that, and then we have selective admission. So unfortunately, we always have more applicants than we do seats in the program. So not everybody gets in because we're just limited to the number of seats we have based on the nature of the laboratory classes in the clinical space. So we do accept 24 students every year. And don't worry, if you don't make it the first year, we're always happy to have you reapply the following year. So it's again, a very strong, academically rigorous program. So this year the application is due March 31st. Then we do interviews in April. And by the end of the academic year, we have the class selected and we let the applicants know.
What kind of qualities are you looking for when you interview these applicants?
So, by the time the student makes it to the interview process, we've already reviewed their GPA, their letters of recommendation, so we have a general idea of them academically and if they have any professional experience. But what we're looking for in the interview process is who that person is. What is their work ethic? How are they going to work in a group? Because it is a program where it's cohort-based, so all the students are together and working cooperatively for 2 years. So how is that person going to work in group activities? That's the question that we ask in the interview. We also ask why they want to become a veterinary technician. A lot of people, when they look at it on the surface, it's a very kind of straightforward, play with puppy and kittens, play with animals type of job. And we kind of try to get away from that right off the get-go because there's a lot of challenges in veterinary medicine. Our job is to ease animal suffering. So you do see suffering. How do you address that? This profession compared to the human medical side, we have to deal with euthanasia. So how is a student going to deal with that when they're out in practice? And then also another thing that we talk about and want the students to be aware of is here in Connecticut compared to other states, we don't have a lot of large animal, a lot of food animal type work, but there is so much more to the profession than just the dog and cats that a lot of people around here think of. So kind of asking them about that, and are they willing to work with other species, and have they thought about that? So trying to get an idea more about who that person is as a whole, and is this going to be the right fit for them?
The food animal piece is really interesting, and it raises the whole question about the way that we get food to the market and to people's plates. And in Minnesota, they call them meat animals. It's just it's a different way of looking at the animals. But for somebody who goes into it wanting to play with puppies and kittens, it's a different challenge.
It is, and one of the other aspects of our program, again, that a lot of people don't think about is we have a great partnership with Yale University. So our students do a laboratory animal rotation down at Yale. So when we talk about laboratory animals, those are our mice, our rats, and the rabbits. So those are animals that a lot of pharmaceutical testing, things like that, are done on. And Yale actually has one of the largest institutions in the country for that type of research. So we're very lucky to have that partnership. But again, when you hear that off the bat, I know sometimes research is a touchy subject, but when our students get involved with it, they see how humanely those animals are treated. Just because it's a little mouse or a rat, that animal is still given the respect and the treatment that it deserves. So I think it's an eye-opener for our students that it's a necessary evil, that in order for the safety of humans and the betterment of human medicine, that we have to use the animal model, but while having to use that model, those animals can be treated as well as possible.
Right. Isn't Jackson Laboratories actually breeding mice for personalized health care? So
The genetics behind it is amazing. So different mice are used for different reasons. And one of the commonly used ones was called a knockout mouse, where they can actually take the genes and knock out part of the genetic material to test for certain aspects of what they're looking for in a disease. So, genetic manipulation is something that's, again, on the forefront of medicine, and because of the research that we see, our students are involved with that to some extent.
Right. It's amazing. And it will revolutionize medicine, right? So you don't just give everybody a prescription for tetracycline, right? Because that's one drug, and you just kind of hope that, given the bell curve, that most people will be impacted by it, but they will actually be able to give you the drug that will work on your body.
Exactly, and that's where medicine's heading, and to be part of that is amazing. And that's why we try to give our students every opportunity. And that's another thing we always talk to our students about. They sometimes question why they have to have biology, chemistry, biochemistry to be a veterinary technician. And the answer is because they're going to be involved with things that have heavy advanced science associated with it, so they need that background. So again, that's one of the things that we're very proud of with this program. When our students graduate, they have a very strong science background that's necessary.
So Amy, you're over mostly at Piper Olson Memorial Hospital, which is where most of these vet tech program courses actually happen. Is that true?
Yeah, well, we have some classes still being held here on campus, and some actually at the Piper Olson Veterinary Hospital location. So the Piper Olson Hospital had done a huge expansion and has a brand new beautiful addition with actually dedicated space for the students. So they have a dedicated classroom that was dedicated to Dr. Steve Levy, who was the initial program coordinator. So that's called the Levy Classroom.
I didn't know that. That's fantastic.
Yes. We couldn't be where we are without Dr. Levy's. And then we also have what we call the hospital within the hospital, which is downstairs in the new addition. And that is 3 separate rooms that the students do some clinical rotations in. So we have a separate operating room where the students will assist with anesthesia for elective spays and neuters, usually shelter animals, animal control officer animals. So the students actually do the anesthesia and assist a doctor of veterinary medicine with the surgery itself. We also have a large treatment area where the students will practice various tasks, learn the hands-on skills necessary to be a good technician when you graduate. And then we have like an exam room space area as well. So we really can spread the students out, bring in animals. We also have a lot of animal models. So we have fake legs with veins and a fake head with veins and fake rat with veins. And so the students start to learn how to, let's say, draw blood on an animal leg. So they practice first with these models and get good techniques established before then they move on to actually working with live animals. So it's an excellent space to work in. It's dedicated, so we have tons of supplies down there, and it's really a nice space for the students to start getting their hands wet.
Yeah, probably literally.
Yes.
Right. So, you've been with this class that's just graduated for the 2 years. So what kinds of changes do you see happen in a student coming from, starting out at the very first course? And it must be complete immersion. Each semester is pretty much entirely veterinary technology courses, so immersion. So how do they change?
I was actually talking about this the other day with some of the current second year students, and I think my favorite part of the program is seeing where they've gone. So seeing them on day 1 of the program and then seeing how they've progressed towards graduation 2 years later. And I so very proud of them and everything that they've accomplished, and to see them when they were nervous and shy and quiet and at times not sure how to work with the animals, to really gain the confidence, the knowledge, and the skill set to then be doing some of these things without a lot of supervision or instruction from one of the instructors, and knowing that they're going to be strong technicians when they graduate in May.
Yeah, confident and knowledgeable.
Yes.
There must be an element of your program that deals with how you deal with humans as well, right? These animals are coming in complements of the humans who care for them.
That's correct. Yeah, you can't be a veterinary technician and not expect to work with people.
Yeah.
Because with pets come owners. So there is a huge component of veterinary medicine that involves dealing with clients and learning how to talk to clients, especially in desperate times when maybe their animal is sick or has to be euthanized. So trying to teach students how to sympathize with owners, communicate with owners, be clear about communication is also as important as some of the hands-on skills that a technician needs to learn.
Yeah, it's just an intriguing field altogether. I'm really excited that we have it here at the college. So we have to take another break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the Wild Kingdom. How's that? Well, welcome back to Middlesex Moments Radio Show, and the Vet Tech program at Middlesex is what we're talking about today with Chris Gargamelli and Amy Lawton. And I promised we would turn to the Wild Kingdom. So over the break, we were talking about bats and mice and things like that. But you're going to be doing some really innovative one-credit courses starting this week, although here we are in the middle of March Madness, waiting for Snowmageddon to hit Connecticut, so there may be some readjustment of the schedule. But tell me about those one-credit courses.
Sure. So, here at the college, one of the things that we always talk about amongst the faculty is what can we do different? How can we innovate and bring something new? So working with Professor Riss Brown, who's in the criminal justice program, we saw that there was some crossover between what law enforcement does and veterinary medicine. So we're offering 3 unique classes that bring those together. So the one that's actually starting on campus today is what we're calling Canine Officer 101. It's an overview of canines' use in law enforcement. So that's, taking a look at detection. So for example, all the drug sniffing dogs, arson sniffing dogs. So how dogs are used for detection. And those surprisingly are a lot of Labradors and a lot of hounds because of the noses that they have. Very strong. And then there's the protection side of things, and those are still primarily German Shepherds. So what we're going to do for this course is we have a retired officer coming in, and he's going to show us how they train the dogs, because there's a lot that goes into the training that you don't realize. That these dogs, and especially on the kind of enforcement and protection sides, they are not by their nature aggressive dogs. They're well trained. They will protect and they will take down a suspect on command, but when they're not in that mode, a child could walk up to them, come up and pet them and be perfectly fine. That's the ideal dog that you use for that. And things too that once you start working with them that you learn that when these dogs bite, the sharp canine teeth that are in the front, they do not use those to bite. They bite with the back molars because their job is to, restrain a suspect, not injure the suspect. So teaching a dog how to even bite a certain way. So that all this training that goes into them is amazing. That's what we're going to be showing the students over the next 2 days. Then the next course we're offering is an overview of being an animal control officer. So as a veterinarian who does, I do emergency and critical care work, I interface with a lot of animal control officers that bring in injured animals, sick animals. So we thought it would be a good idea to show that side because those are the law enforcement officials that are enforcing animal ordinances and laws. They're the ones doing welfare checks, investigating abuse cases. So we thought it was a good kind of crossover between the two because that's a big intersection between the enforcement and veterinary medicine. So that's the course, if we don't have snow, we're going to be offering Wednesday and Thursday. And then the final course we're offering is environmental enforcement. So this is a huge issue, and again, one that's not spoken about a lot. You don't hear it in the news because it's not one of the kind of top news. But in the state, we actually have environmental enforcement officers, and these are the ones that are dealing with wildlife. So when you see on the news a story about a report of a bear or a wild animal that isn't where they're supposed to be, that's where the environmental officers come in. And again, dealing with wildlife is a very specific subset of veterinary medicine. So just kind of bringing those two specialties together and informing our students about it, we just thought were great ways to kind of spend spring break. For a lot of our students who don't travel, it's an opportunity to come to campus and learn something fun.
Yeah, and completely different. There was a photograph of a bobcat in Middletown.
Yes.
How is that possible? And isn't it true that if there's one bobcat, there's got to be more?
That's probably a good. Yeah, it's probably correct.
It is. And what happens is this is an issue in terms of environmental issues of encroachment onto animals' natural habitat. As natural habitats shrink, we encroach on their environment more and more, and they come and visit ours. And a lot of times they're just hungry. So, and that's why it's important never to intentionally feed wildlife. I mean, they knock over a trash can, that's going to happen, but intentionally feeding them, nothing good ever comes of that.
That's, of course my husband and I, we feed the birds, right? So the birds feed, that goes to the squirrels, and we're probably baiting the backyard with all kinds of grains and seeds. But as you say that, there was something I was wanting to ask both of you, which is feeding our animals at home. So we're back away from the wild kingdom into the kingdom that we have in our homes, our dogs and cats. So what kind of advice do you give to people? The standard myth is you don't feed them table scraps, but in the wild, a bobcat that's hungry is going to eat whatever happens to appear in its path. So what do you say about how do you feed your animals?
So this is actually a great question and very timely. So the class that I teach here on campus is the anatomy and physiology class to our students. So they take animal anatomy and physiology, which is a diverse course because we cover all the different species. So we're lecturing on that right now, and the first slide that I have when I give this presentation is called "What Do Our Animal Friends Eat?" So we look at cats. Cats are true carnivores. Their diet should consist primarily, if not only, of meat. So they're true carnivores. Our dogs are omnivores, and so are humans. We eat both plant and animal material to get our supply of nutrients. And then we look at our horses and cows, which are herbivores. They eat only vegetables. So that's the first place you got to start when you talk about any sort of nutrition in animals is what are they genetically designed to eat as a species? And then we build from there. So if you look at cat food, commercial cat food is primarily protein source based. So, if you go to the store and buy your standard one, it's chicken based. Chicken's kind of the easiest source of protein, but you can get beef, and you can buy cat food in any variety, fish, beef. But if you look at all these cat foods, they're all primarily protein, animal protein based. And then if you look at dog food, it's a mixture of grain and protein, or grain and meat, because they're omnivores. So, most commercial diets for our pets are very well balanced. So again, coming from my background of doing emergency and critical care, where we run into problems is when owners deviate from kind of the nice, well-balanced commercial dog foods. Table scraps, like anything else, just like us with, treats, anything in moderation is fine. Moderation is okay. You give a little table scrap, a little piece of something here or there, your pet's probably going to be perfectly fine. They get into the trash, or you feed them, the leftover ham bone with a bunch of meat on it, you're going to run into some trouble. So again, I think, myself included with my own pets, I give them a little something, but in moderation. I think, just like good advice for us when we're eating our own diets, anything in moderation is okay, but, stick to the basics.
What about the idea that they can eat, I'm talking about dogs now, that they can manage to digest bones? I mean, chicken bones, isn't that also a problem?
So there's this trend in veterinary medicine called raw diet, where you actually just
like a paleo for dogs.
Exactly. So dogs to some extent can handle bones, but uncooked bones. So raw bones, their teeth are designed to grind it and eat it. Those are fine. Where we get into trouble is once you cook bones, they don't break apart as easy. They actually shard and can cause problems in the intestinal tract. They can actually poke through, either starting out in the oral cavity in the mouth, going through the esophagus, all the way through the GI tract. They can poke and cause a lot of trouble. So cooked bones are not good. Uncooked, if you're feeding a proper raw diet, is acceptable. But again, from my own personal experience, I think Amy probably does a lot with her own animals. We wouldn't necessarily feed those things to our own animals. But again, for a person that's kind of following that trend and doing it properly, it's okay.
So here's another question for you, and we're probably running out of time, but I'm so curious about this. Why do dogs like cat food?
So remember before when we were having this discussion, I talked about the carnivore versus the omnivore versus so the cat has much higher protein, and with higher protein from an animal source comes higher fat. So it's like eating a nice piece of steak that's well marbled for us. So when we get a nice steak that's well marbled and has a little fat on it and nice and juicy, that's what cat food is to a dog. So that's why it's because of the higher protein and fat.
It just tastes better.
Exactly.
Somehow, although it's kind of hard to figure out how the taste of that could be any good. The smell of dog food, especially the dry food and cat food, can be pretty abhorrent.
It is, but again, remember our our animal friends have a stronger sense of smell than we do, but they're looking for different things.
So, Amy, how many animals do you have?
Oh boy.
Oh boy!
I have 4 dogs and 5 cats.
Wow.
So quite a household, mostly rescues.
Mostly rescues. Do they get along?
They do.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
The cats and the dogs.
Yep, they sleep together. The dogs groom the cat ears. It's a delicacy, apparently, if you're a dog, to clean a cat ear. So very lucky they all get along.
Do your dogs like to eat the cat food, or do you have to feed them separately?
Yeah, I feed them separately. Yeah, because they would. They would for sure eat the cat food.
Yeah. What about exercise on both sides? Cats are supposed to be kept in the house, although I have to say mine is an escape artist. But what kind of exercise for cats, and then certainly for dogs? What about dog parks, running free versus being on a leash? Do you have advice?
I guess for me, I prefer like controlled walking, whether it's through the neighborhood at before the start of your day or at the end of your day. Take a nice walk with your dogs. It allows some nice time to bond and gives them the exercise that they so deserve and need. It is important to get them some exercise every day.
For their cardio health, I would think.
Sure, and their mental health. Mm-hmm. I like to go on hikes, so walking in the woods and doing some swimming, even if they're big swimmers. So that's my preferred method. The cats, I have to admit I have some lazy house cats.
I think they sleep 23 out of 24 hours.
Yeah, and my dogs are close to that as well. But, I think the cats, have their toys and things like that, scratching posts, those cat trees where they can climb up high and sit and watch the world go by. Keeps them pretty happy, at least in my house.
This has been so lovely. I mean, I think we're all animal lovers around this table. I really appreciate your coming over to talk with me today about the program. And if anybody's interested, they can find it on our website.
If you go to the Middlesex Community College website, www.mxcc.edu, go under admissions, selective admissions, and Vet Tech is right there.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. This is Anna Wasesha at Middlesex Community College, wishing you all a very good day.